That's it. It's over. With Fujifilm releasing a brand new version of the 56mm 1.2, also known as the 56mm 1.2 WR, pretty much spells the doom of the old and tired and now obsolete 56mm 1.2 regular, I guess we'll call it. I mean, look at this thing. Look at this thing, how old and tired it looks. You see that right there? And so I thought I'd make this video for you poor saps out there that are stuck with this old, tired, and now absolutely obsolete 56mm. Okay, that was a short tribute, but attention spans, people. Attention spans. I should probably have made it a vertical video. That would have helped. So I purchased my 56mm 1.2 back when I had only the Fujifilm X-T20 as my only Fujifilm camera. And I'm going to put it on there so we could see how it looks. But I was blown away immediately by the bocaliciousness and also how well it kind of, felt on this tiny camera. It definitely was front heavy. But I also had a little bit of a grip for the Fujifilm X-T20, which made it a little easier to hold. I did want to protect the glass on the front, but I didn't want to put any kind of like UV filter or anything on there. So I purchased an aftermarket lens hood that's metal, and makes my lens look a little bigger, but here it is right here. There you go. So it protected the front element a little bit, and I also put a lens cap always on the front of this, and so I never touched the glass at all. And over time, my clickable aperture ring has actually stopped working. So now listen how smooth. There are no clicks whatsoever, but it's fine. And the 56mm looks great on the larger cameras like the Fujifilm X-T2, which was the first larger camera to use it. I also have the X-T3. And this is a little bit more balanced and makes a little bit more sense and feels better in the hand, but totally works fine on the smaller cameras. All right, so let's jump on the computer and take a look at these old and tired files. So no lens review is complete without a picture of a brick wall. This was taken with the Fujifilm X-T2 with the 56mm 1.2, and this was done at f9. I know what you're saying. Why would you buy a 1.2 and then shoot it at f9? Don't worry, we have plenty of 1.2 pictures to show you. However, you should know that if you stop this lens down to f9, f8, f11, you just get incredibly sharp, beautiful images with super micro contrast and all that good stuff. Corner sharpness, no one looks at your corners, they don't matter. And here we have my car I took a picture of. With the Fujifilm X-T20, this was in our travels to Arizona, and just again, beautiful 56mm 1.2 image. This was taken at f5, so we want a little bit of the sign in the background, but again, happy with that, even though the lens is old. Straight out of camera JPEG using Velvia film simulation probably boosted the saturation a little because it looks a little hyper here. This is at 1.2. And so if you're shooting leaves at 1.2, some are sharp, some are not sharp. So you can kind of see a focus fall off, which is kind of nice. And the game becomes pick the leaf that's in focus. And so it looks like this one right here is where I focused. But you could see how nice and dreamy and filmic the background is. And this is, like I said, a JPEG straight out of camera. Now this one was taken with the Fujifilm X-T20, 24 megapixels. Psh, so outdated, oh my gosh. But here you can see the ginkgo leaves and the fall off with the building in the background. Colors and micro contrast, although outdated now, look very great. This was a little fall scene, again, taken with Velvia film simulation. And what's cool is you can take a step back. You know, it's a prime lens, so you can step back and take one photo. But then you can kind of zoom in and use the bocaliciousness of 1.2 to sort of, isolate your subject, which in this case is this little planty plant right here. And I actually made a print of this. Look at that. It's even better in real life. isolating your subject. That's what this lens is all about. It's about just pinpointing a composition where you want people to focus on just what's in focus in the depth of field. And here I just moved in a little bit closer. But you have to be careful, because if you move in too close, then your picture is just a blob. And that happens with this outdated and ugly 56mm 1.2. is it must be used responsibly. You have to know how much depth of field you have, because it could be overdone. So this is kind of overdone, getting close where just part of the flower's in focus. It's probably better if you step back at 1.2 and use a little bit more depth so that whole flower's in focus, and then your background falls off into more blurriness. This happens a lot with people doing portraits. You know, they think they're focusing on a person, but sometimes only the ears are in focus or just the nose. Now here's a picture of me, a JPEG with my name behind there. And one thing to know that is, this is taken at 5.6, and a lot of us think that when you shoot 5.6 that everything will be in focus, but you know, my name here in the background is actually not in focus, and the fence is out of focus, and those cars back there are definitely out of focus. Another thing is, if you give this to a person to photograph, because obviously I didn't take this picture, they don't know how the focus points or anything works, or face detection, and so you get images like this one. I bet the new lens could have, handled this. Now, as far as autofocus goes, this 56mm is a mixed bag, meaning I'd come back and get blurry images, but I bet a lot of it was user error. Like, this was an XT20 image when I first had the camera, and I could just imagine that this was because the focus point was off to the side, and I just focused and shot, and my daughter is out of focus. Because if you take your time with this lens and put the focus square around your object, it will grab the object. So one thing I started doing with the 56 was shooting a little bit of a burst in continuous. So here's my son, and he is at 2.8, he's blurry, but I noticed that the next frame, he's walking by me, he's in focus. So the camera grabbed his face, or the focus point grabbed some contrast. But I did find that early on I was getting a lot of blurry images, mostly because I didn't know which focus point / zone continuous single worked best. Now, even though I figured out how to use the lens and the autofocus on my older cameras, I still prefer to pre-focus. Now, I made a video on pre-focusing. I'll link that up below, but it's where you focus on where you think your subject is going to be or enter the scene. So these hummingbirds, for example, are definitely going to be, using the feeder here. So I knew I pre-focused on the feeder, and I put a 4.5 depth of field on my aperture. So that way I could, have a better success rate with catching the birds. So I pre-focused there. And then when I'm shooting street photography at 1.2, this is at 1.2, I have a sliver of focus back there, if you could see it here. And what I did was I was pre-focusing and waiting for interesting legs and feet to enter the scene. And this jogger kind of dude with hairy legs came through, and he looked so kind of 80s with his socks and the little shorts. But here we can see that it focused on this first image. You see his foot is focused, but the depth of field was so shallow that here it only focused on his back sneaker. And here on the sneaker, we can see a little bit of a fault of a lot of lenses that open up to 1.2. And this is purple fringing, where you get a little bit of coloring there on the edges. And sometimes you get some green fringing, like over here. We get some green fringing over here. Yeah, terrible. Now, I did use the 56 here at f4 to photograph some action of some equestrian action. And for this, I used obviously continuous focus, and I used a grid in the center. And the 56mm with this horse running pretty much would grab all of them except one or two. That's what I found. So here we go, boom. This is a sequence. She's in focus here. Here we have someone jumping over this little obstacle, and let's see if they're in focus. They're not in focus, right? But what happens is as soon as the next frame happens, let's see, it's still focused on the background here. So 2 images are out of focus. It's focusing on the background, but the third one grabbed the horse. And usually I found once it grabbed, it would pretty much try to stay here. Nope, that one's out of focus. Then next one is in focus, in focus, in focus. Horse is jumping, still in focus. There we go, horse coming by, still in focus. Now out of focus, in focus. So not the best lens for action, but it can handle, it would get 70 to 80% grab rate for something like this with a horse running through it. Again, it depends on the speed, how far your subject is, and what f-stop you're at. But it's pretty impressive that this slow, obsolete focuser can grab a horse that's jumping over some obstacles. Now, not as fast as a horse, but stretching here is my daughter when we were testing the Fujifilm X-T2, I believe here. Nope, X-T20s. We were doing continuous with a grid autofocus, and here she goes. She's taking off. First one is a little out of focus, and then the camera grabbed, and the next three are in focus. This one is not 100% in focus, and then the next one is pretty focused, I guess. So you can see it does a decent job. Here you can see the bokeh balls, very nice, very beautiful. No cat eyes over here. We're shooting at 1.2, very nice. Sure, it could do sports. Here's me sitting at a Mets game shooting DeGrom and Yelich from the seats. But here I used Velvia to get beautiful greens and beautiful bright blues for this little baseball scene. Now, one thing that concerns me about newer lenses that are released is that they're putting better coatings on them, they're putting better glass on them, and what's happening is the images are just getting so sharp and so good that you lose a little bit of the quality. And I found with my Fujifilm X-T2 and this lens, those two together seem to have the most filmic look. This is a JPEG straight out of camera with nothing done to it. And you could see right away that this Fifth Avenue building clock is very sharp, but not clinically sharp. It's just nice and clean. And then the background just falls off nice and soft bocaliciousness without being so ugly. And so the X-T2 with the Fujifilm 56mm 1.2, I like that combo together. Here's how sharp City Bike is. I mean, how much sharper can these lenses get? This is at 1.2, and you can read City Bike super, and this is the X-T2, that's 24 megapixels. It's not 40 megapixels. And, you know, it already is just super sharp. You could just read this little code here. Super nice. And the fall off you can see with the bikes in the background. This is the X-T3, which is, again, the 26 megapixels. Great colors, great fall off. Great micro contrast. I love it. And if you get close to objects, you get obviously more bokeh. So this is the minimum focus distance on this little acorn, and just a warm, lovely fall image. Beautiful. Look at this corner bokeh. Look at that right there. Going deep into the worms. Now you would think that this image was taken at 1.2, but I don't think I would have gotten the lizard at all in focus. This is taken at 5.0. And again, probably getting close because he thinks that we can't see him. And we kind of just slowly sneak up to him. And we got a beautiful little picture of this lizard. And the rocks fall off. And the background is just insanely blurry. Great for landscapes, this obsolete lens. It flattens out the image really nicely. Not as much as like a 200mm or anything. But you do get a nice little perspective. Here was the JPEG, and the edited RAW I cropped in a little bit. And also used the Velvia film simulation. This is the Fujifilm X-T20 f8. And here, if we zoom in, it's super nice and sharp at f8 for a landscape. Great for portraits. This is at 1.2, a JPEG straight out of camera. This is Provia film simulation, which is all I used when I first started using the Fujifilm X-T20. And this person was the only person that came to my first photo walk. And we just walked around and shot in Times Square after the photo expo, which was very cool. So I can't remember her name, but if you're in the comments still, say hello. But she was pretty awesome. With the 56, it doesn't have to be a headshot like the last one. This is my wife with a full, a little bit more like 3/4 body. and you still have beautiful separation in the background. Great skin tones, of course, on the Fujifilm system. This is a JPEG. Now, for those of you without kids and you have pets, it does them too. I mean, it's not obsolete there. It can actually photograph animals. But this was a 56 millimeter 1.2 shot of this dog. The eyes are in focus and you could see nose is gone, ears are gone. But I will tell you that you can do the same with the 50 millimeter f2 lens, which is WR like the new one. And it also does the nose and the ear thing. And I don't know if you could pretty much, I don't know. I can't tell. You know this lens is getting old because here's an image of my daughter. Here I used the Stella Pro lights to light her up, which was a continuous light source with a very bright background with the 56 millimeter 1.2. That's a JPEG. And here she is as a 13-year-old, and the image just looks old. And I mean, this thing can't keep up. I mean, here it looks super new. Here it just doesn't work. Okay, two people in front of the city, and at 1.2, one of my favorite things about the Fujifilm system is that, and if you use electronic shutter, you can get crazy shutter speeds. This is taken at 1/18,000th of a second in bright sunlight. And I find that a lot of the other cameras I have that are even more expensive can't do that. So that's a very cool thing. This is taken with the Fujifilm XS10. Sun stars were great with this image. I just liked if I stop down to f14. This is f14 with the Fujifilm X-T3, and you get a very cool sun star. And I would kind of try to practice that all the time with the little sun star. Here's a raw file cityscape. This is taken with the at f11 with the Fujifilm X-T3, and I just love this image because at f11 you get the little sparkles here. You could see the little sparkles from the lens, those sun stars. And you're not going to get, GFX sort of detail if you start zooming in too much here. So we've done this scene before with the GFX, and we can actually see people in the windows. But if you zoom to 100%, you're still going to be happy with the images. And this lens is a great street lens too. I know everyone wants a little bit wider for street, but I love doing slices of New York here, capturing slices of buildings together. I love capturing, a little bit of street scenes like this biker here. It just makes the background go out so blurry, which is really great. Here's a picture of a bodega, but the bodega is nice and sharp. You could see Francesca here, and that Minnie is peeling, and old and dirty. Yeah. Yesterday's news, obsolete, done for. The 56 millimeter 1.2. There's probably going to be a lot of these on the used market, but don't even bother buying it. It's not worth it. All right, I'll see you guys next time.